Hello and welcome. I'm Alfred Weber, and today is July 16th, 2011, that we're recording this program with independent scientist Leuren Moret, who's coming to us from Berkeley, California. Welcome, Leuren.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfred.
So this is yet another aspect of the nuclear genocide that is occurring, and we could entitle this program Nuclear Food Contamination and U.S. and Canadian government complicity are growing. And so please tell us, let's start out with nuclear food contamination in Japan, which is the initial target country of this nuclear depopulation genocide event known as Fukushima.
Well, it seems very apparent now that radiation in Japan through the government is being spread willfully. And the entire country is coming unhinged. One of the things that's happened just in the last week or two is discovery that these radioactive cattle from Fukushima prefecture, especially from the evacuated zone, have been distributed to 26 prefectures now. That's the news today in Japan, throughout Japan, without informing anyone. And the one that really blew the lid off of this scandal was in Yokohama, in an elementary school with a kindergarten and high school, and it was exposed that very radioactive beef has been fed to these kindergartners and elementary children as well as the high school children. And I just like to read this because it's so in detail. And I couldn't put this in my own words, I guess. Beef from Fukushima to be tested somehow in Fukushima from now on, but it's too late for school kids in Yokohama. This is July 12th, and it's from an excellent blog, which we can put that up on the screen if you want to. Anyway, children from nursery schools and kindergartens up to junior high schools in Yokohama City had already been fed the beef from Fukushima since late April. Then the news of radioactive beef from Minami-Soma City broke a few days ago. The news, which had been dismissed by many as baseless rumor and some sort of urban legend in Yokohama and elsewhere, has finally been reported on the Mainichi Shimbun Japanese newspaper, more or less, on July 12th. And he's saying they told less of the truth even than they should have. An anonymous reader of my blog, who turned out to be a councilman with no party affiliation of the Yokohama City Council, commented on my blog entry on July 9th that discussed the contaminated beef and radiation exposure of children. He said in the comment, quote, "Responding to your post, I'd like to alert you to the fact that a large quantity of beef from Fukushima prefecture has been used in school lunches in Yokohama City without citizens and parents being informed. We are living every day trying to protect our lives and with bitterness and regret at our powerlessness. Please spread the news." Can you imagine, Alfred, how these people in government positions feel about what they know is happening? It's part of the war. It's an information war, too. It's psychological warfare. He sent me the link to the simple message board the councilman, Mr. Masataka Ota, keeps for his constituents. So I went, and the following day, in my rough summary of posts and happenings since May, posted the councilmen and concerned residents of Yokohama. It may change the impression you may have about Yokohama City. It has changed mine. This is from the councilman's post. In mid-May, Yokohama announced that it would measure radiation in food items that go to school lunches, but the only food items tested would be those grown in Yokohama. In other words, none or close to none. Most of the food came from out of Yokohama. For vegetables and meat from Fukushima Prefecture, the city considered safe because they were tested in Fukushima Prefecture. Well, Alfred, maybe they were tested, but maybe they weren't. More likely they weren't, because no radiation was even reported. In late May, the councilmen and many of the people who commented on the board were afraid that the city was using radioactive foodstuff for school lunches. But there were many posts from people who said, "Oh, come on, it's just a rumor. And without a solid data from the government officials, we shouldn't speculate. You're all overreacting." There was even a post from a teacher, as revealed by the IP address, especially apparently using a school computer, who trashed people who were worried about the food safety for children with a vulgar Yakuza-like language. Yakuza is the mafia of Japan. There were messages from parents who had their children carry their own lunches and water bottles to schools and kindergartens, and the schools denied their children to consume their homemade lunches and water.
So this is the schools enforcing the
Yes.
genocide.
The national government genocide.
Yeah.
The mayor of Yokohama and the Board of Education president answered the councilmen in a meeting that they considered the food items used for school lunches, quote, "are safe because they are sold in the market," unquote, and that they had instructed the school principals to answer the parents that way when they asked about the safety of school lunches. This is a mafia. This is a nuclear mafia. This is a global network, and some of the people I named are the ones running this. It's run from the United States. Then, in early June, the city of Yokohama relented to mounting complaints from parents and people like this councilman, announced that it would conduct sample testing of the food items for school lunches. At the same time, though, it announced that it would use food items from the disaster-affected areas, in other words, Fukushima, to show support. So they're talking out of both sides of their mouths, but continuing to poison the public. Some parents went to ask their school principals and teachers, quote, "Why aren't you doing something to find out if the food is safe?" unquote. Their answer, quote, "Well, everyone's eating it." Everyone's eating it, Alfred.
Yeah.
Unquote. In the meantime, schools started to prepare for swimming classes in their swimming pools, and not to waste pool water that had been in the pools, which is highly contaminated with the fallout from Fukushima. They used it to water the school gardens and yards. So they just moved the radiation from the swimming pool to the whole outdoor environment. To the horror of parents who were called monster parents for worrying too much about radiation. Then a bombshell. On June 5th, an insider leaked to the councilmen from a concerned foodstuff dealer. The dealer provided the unique identification numbers for the cows whose meat was used in Yokohama's school lunches. Here is a food dealer making huge profits with a conscience. They were all from Fukushima. All of the cows that were, the meat was sent to purchased by the Yokohama schools. It was all coming from Fukushima. Why would Yokohama City use Fukushima beef for children? Because it was cheap. Because consumers didn't want to buy Fukushima beef if they see it on the supermarket shelves. The price of Fukushima beef had plummeted by 40 to 50%. No one wanted it. Price went down. A cost-conscious city in schools and kindergartens and nursery schools bought it to feed small children. Without telling them or their parents, the meat was from Fukushima. The city continued to do absolutely nothing. In mid-June, the councilman got another piece of information. Prior to the Fukushima 1 nuclear plant accident, there was no use of Fukushima beef in school lunches in Yokohama ever. This was a totally new source for their beef. All of their beef was now from Fukushima, and it was highly contaminated. After the accident,
who would have given the order up in Fukushima to ship the beef to Yokohama, I wonder?
Oh, that would be someone like Yamashita.
Right.
It would be the Minister of the Interior, or it would be in the provincial government, prefectural government, but they would take their orders from the national government. So it would be the Minister of the Interior coming out of his office.
So this is a targeted genocide at children.
Yes.
It's not just the impersonal workings of the marketplace, in your opinion.
Yeah, that's right. After the accident, let's see. After the accident, the price of Fukushima beef plummeted. Meat dealers got the cheap meat, sold it to the city, pocketed the very fat margin. Schools, both private and public, it looks like, fed small children with the potentially contaminated beef with the tacit approval of the mayor and of education.
Now, what I found really amazing was this, is that there was one cow here in Canada found with mad cow disease in Alberta.
Yes.
And Japan cut off all exports of beef from Canada to Japan. And this occurred about 2 years ago for fear of mad cow disease. And here we have a situation where there's 10 times the levels, at least, of radiation in the Fukushima area as at Chernobyl. And the animals there are clearly potentially radioactive and potentially dangerous to consume. And yet, all the meticulousness that was devoted to keeping, a very, very low risk of mad cow disease coming into Japan was suddenly forgotten at Fukushima. I just want to bring out that particular historical parallel.
Well, I'd like to bring out another historical parallel. The Japanese probably have the highest food quality in the world. It's very, very high. I have been in 50 countries, and Japan has the best food quality in the world. And I read in the Japan Times maybe 10 years ago that Japanese customs had returned 35 kilograms of dried porcini mushrooms from Italy back to Italy because they said it was too highly contaminated with cesium from Chernobyl. This is 25 years after Chernobyl. They're saying that the porcini mushrooms, the wild mushrooms from Italy, still have too much cesium in them. That's a very small amount compared to what is in the beef and other food products now in Japan. And the government, the politicians, the academics are all telling the Japanese population to eat it and live their life normally and enjoy it, knowing this is genociding the future of Japan.
Right, and that type of governmental decision is only plausible in terms of that pyramid of the false flag operation and of intentional depopulation that starts with the British Crown, the Dutch Crown, the Zionist bankers out of the City of London, and the Rockefellers.
And just to confirm that, to go further on with this blog, he says, quote, aside from the radioactive school lunches, the city of Yokohama also planned to send the city's children to a summer school in another 2 weeks in Ibaraki Prefecture, where the air radiation was more than 10 times the official Yokohama number, measured on the top of a 5-story building. So can you imagine what the reading was on the ground? Much higher. The highest radiation levels are on the surface of the ground, because that's where the radioactive particles fall. Well, that was on top of a 5-story building. That's probably 83 feet high. And they're sending the children after they fed them radioactive food. They're sending them for the summer to an area near the Fukushima disaster that has air levels that are conservatively 10 times higher than in Yokohama, but in reality, it's a hot spot. It's much higher. The personnel at the summer school privately told the councilmen, I wouldn't recommend it. Personnel at the school in Ibaraki Prefecture told the Yokohama councilmen, I would not recommend your students coming to our facility for summer camp. And that's because of the radiation concern. Then, in late June, the councilmen reported the result of the meeting at the Board of Education. All the beef from Fukushima that went to school lunches in Yokohama from April 23rd to June 7th came from the planned evacuation zone in Fukushima. There were 916 cows from the zone. None of them exceeded 5,000 counts per minute in surface radiation, but none was tested zero. And I believe the radiation limit is about 500 counts per minute. But even at 100 counts per minute in the air, you better get out of that area because that is dangerous. The information was obtained by tracing the unique identification numbers for the cows. On July 9th in Japan, the news broke that the meat from a meat cow from Minamasoma City, which is in Fukushima, was found with radioactive cesium of 2,300 becquerels per kilogram, almost 5 times the provisional safety limit, which is 500 becquerels per kilogram. And so the internal contamination in those cows, which was much higher than expected, from the external reading, and it was 5 times higher than they're even allowed to release to the public. The councilman's post on July 9th said, quote, all Fukushima-grown beef that was served in school lunches in Yokohama City was contaminated. The contamination that was checked at the time of shipment from Fukushima Prefecture was only the surface radiation of a live cow, and there was no information as to the contamination after the cow was processed into meat. Why would they measure it if they had great profits to make? School children have already ingested this meat. There was a leak from some school nutritionists of this fact, but the city's Board of Education, and the school principals lied by saying, quote, "Food items for school lunches are safe because they are sold in the market," unquote. As the result, elementary school children in Yokohama City have been internally irradiated. Finally, on July 11th, Yokohama City decided to stop using beef in school lunches. Caveat: they will stop for the month of July, and they will use pork instead, as if pork is safe. They have even more pigs than cows to get rid of from the contaminated areas of Fukushima. The last lunch will be on July 15th, then it's summer break. The city's labor union, which includes city workers who prepare school lunches, has issued a statement protesting, don't hold your breath, the city's decision to stop using beef, as it will spread the baseless rumor. One or two detractors on the councilman's board who have been the apologists for the government seem to have disappeared after the news of 78,000 becquerels per kilogram of cesium was in the hay fed to the cows.
Disgusting.
And it's disgusting. And so this deliberate spreading of the radiation, which is part of the distribution of contaminated food products, has extended, for instance, to the other cattle. And in the Minamisoma city, which I mentioned, they measured 4,320 becquerels per kilo of radioactive cesium found in those beef, and they were from the emergency evacuation zone. Not even the planned evacuation zone or just the plain evacuation zone. It's from the zone that needs to urgently be evacuated. The Prime Minister's assistant and current minister in charge of the nuclear accident at Fukushima, his Goshi Hosono, is going to announce the abolition of the emergency evacuation ready zone, because the first step in TEPCO's roadmap to cleaning up the plant has been mostly successfully implemented. Well, it hasn't been. They haven't been able to do anything because the accidents and releases keep still happening. And none of the Arriva water treatment pumps and filter systems, they can't even get them to work. Now, this is horrible. Fukushima Prefecture has announced it will shut down the official shelters within Fukushima, which will force the evacuees to go back to their contaminated homes. Minamisoma City has issued a notice to all 32,000 city residents who've been living in the shelters, temporary housing outside Fukushima Prefecture, that they must return to Minamisoma, high radiation or not. And that was in the Mainichi Yamagata newspaper version on July 12th, 2011. Now, the national government will spend 100 billion yen, 1.26 billion US dollars, to observe the health of 1 million Fukushima residents for 30 years instead of evacuating them as soon as possible. About 1,600 yen or $20 US a year per resident is what this survey is costing. Life is cheap. Since the national government is utterly broke, it will ultimately be paid by the taxpayers of Japan. All of this is being passed on to the taxpayers, just like in the U.S., just like in every country with nuclear power. It's a totally corrupt, gangster-run, City of London-dominated operation. Remember, Dr. Shunichi Yamashita will be the vice president of the Fukushima Medical University, who will do the observation and research. They tried to kick him out of the prefecture, and now he got promoted. Matsumo City in Chiba Prefecture, that's the city where I collected the baby teeth when I was in Japan, found 47,400 becquerels per kilo of radioactive cesium in the ashes from the city's garbage incinerator. But the city simply mixed with other ashes with low radiation to bring the final number to 5,660 becquerels per kilo, which is allowed by the government. Since the final mixed ashes measured lower than the provisional limit for burying the ashes, which is 8,000 becquerels per kilo, the city already buried the ashes and will continue to do so. That was reported July 13th in the Mainichi newspaper, the Chiba version. On the other hand, Nagarayama City in Chiba Prefecture simply sent 30 tons of its radioactive ashes, 27,000 becquerels per kilo, from its incinerator by cargo train to Odate City and Akita Prefecture in Tohoku. That's way up in northern Japan, near the disaster. And Nagarayama City has a contract with a private waste disposal company in Akita. This waste disposal company is not a nuclear waste disposal company. As far as I could tell from the description of the company, it is just a regular waste disposal company. So that was reported in another newspaper on the 12th. So the problem is the government is putting up these standards and limits and requirements that this highly contaminated garbage waste and ashes be disposed of, but they don't have any solution or offer any solution or any storage facility. So what can the cities do? They have to dilute it and ship it to some private company that's going to dump it somewhere. And this has happened all over the world. The mafia dumped huge amounts of radioactive waste all over the Mediterranean and down the coast of Somalia. By loading ships with it, they buy old ships and fill them up with nuclear waste. They get paid tons of money, and then they sink them off of Sardinia, off of the Turkish coast, off of the African coast. And all this stuff is leaking and killing divers and fishermen and polluting all of the food supply.
Right.
They're polluting the whole food supply for the whole planet.
Right. Right. Now, back to Japan and the sort of genocide that is going on there through the food supply. You talk about Tokyo citizens are now putting Geiger counters on the sidewalks.
Yes, this is really interesting. The response of the Japanese government to these children that we've actually filed a lawsuit in Japan. There are 10 Japanese lawyers, including a famous judge who volunteered to do this, and it's to demand a court order in Koriyama City, which has a friendly judge, to issue an order, mandatory order for the government to evacuate 350,000 children who are in danger in Fukushima Prefecture. And I've collected declarations and support recommendations from international scientists, which we've sent to the court and to the press conferences that are being held around this lawsuit. And the response by the government was to fund a study for the next 30 years of these poor exposed citizens and fund it with $1.26 billion. But all they did for the children was to send dosimeters to Fukushima Prefecture for 280,000 children to measure their external exposure. All of their playgrounds are exposed. The parks are exposed. The piles of dry leaves and the foliage trash that comes out of these parks is all completely contaminated. Greenpeace went to Fukushima City and measured in the parks around the toilets where there's a lot of water draining and collecting, which would collect radiation. And they found horrendous levels. So the city closed the parks. They didn't clean them up. They just closed them, and people are going and using them anyway. The schools have bulldozed, the parents and the teachers have bulldozed the top layers of soil off of the playgrounds, but where do they put that highly contaminated soil? They piled it up on the corners of the edges of the playgrounds. So that's all remobilized with winds and rain and weather and air movement. So the children are just being nuked to death, literally. And if the children go to school with food and water that their parents gave them, knowing that it's clean, the teachers will not allow them to eat it or consume it. They are forced to have what all the other children do. And if the parents object, they're gang stalked. They're literally gang stalked by the education mafia, which is what happens here in the U.S. Same thing. Now, in Ibaraki Prefecture, which is next to Fukushima, the citizens have finally started doing their own monitoring because they didn't trust the government monitoring. Well, no wonder the government was measuring radiation from 83 feet high up on a Tokyo building, and you can imagine how low the radiation counts were compared to what's on the ground. And the Tokyo citizens were so fed up with the lies, they had yellow rain even in Tokyo, which was reported in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Chernobyl. That's the radioactive iodine staining the rain. There's such high concentrations in the atmosphere. So the Tokyo citizens started putting their Geiger counters, walking around Tokyo, putting their Geiger counters on the sidewalk, filming the counts with their cell phones, and then posting them on YouTube. That stuff is going all over the internet. And then I wanted to just say that the problem is that the Japanese government and TEPCO are only measuring the external radiation. They are not measuring the radiation in the food and reporting it accurately. They are not following their own rules and laws for restricting food consumption when it's at certain contaminated levels. And they are not considering the internal effects of radiation exposure at all, which is many times more serious and worse than external radiation contamination. And they're also not mentioning the 1,300 fission products besides radioactive iodine and cesium that they're reporting. They're not even mentioning uranium and plutonium that are alpha emitters. And alpha emitters are, let's see, alpha emitters are much, much, much worse than the other beta and gamma emitters internally. I have it written down, but now I can't find it. But another very dangerous food source, which the viewers today should take mind of, is that food contamination in filter feeders in the ocean and water, bodies of water, bioconcentrate radiation by 40,000 to 150,000 times higher than in the contaminated water that they live in. And these are little animals like mussels, oysters, abalone, clams, things like that, sea slugs, and they should be avoided absolutely rigorously because they are much, much worse than, for instance, the beef or pork or the vegetables. Much higher levels of concentration, and you die very quickly from eating them if they're very contaminated. Now, radiation plus chemicals multiply the effects of each other. They're not talking about that. There's a lot of pollution in Japan, and the rain out of this radiation, which is just floating up into the troposphere, the low levels of the atmosphere where all the storms are. 95% of the radiation released from Fukushima is going to be rained out into the environment in 2.5 months. Nuclear bomb testing, only 15% of that total from all the nuclear bomb tests ended up in our environment. 85% is still high up in the atmosphere. So this isn't just a little bit of radiation. This isn't low-level radiation. This is an acute dose to the whole northern hemisphere. Of course, the effects will take a long time to be noticeable in terms of food supplies and the illnesses, but the whole northern hemisphere is contaminated, and most particularly all of Japan and the west coast of North America. The whole food supply is completely contaminated. In fact, the west coast and Japan should have been evacuated. Radiation exposure in children is 10 to 20 times higher because children are much more sensitive than adults. So when you're allowing children to be exposed to 20 microsieverts an hour, which radiation workers are exposed to, that's the equivalent of 200 to 1,000 microsieverts per hour to a child. It's a death sentence. And so that's what all these lies are about. So let's just look at a 1 million electron volt beta particle. It produces 90 ion pairs in air. A 1 million electron volt gamma ray produces 71,000 ion pairs in air. And a plutonium 239 weapons particle with a half-life of 24,110 years produces many thousands of times more. So we do have a terrible radiation disaster.
Yeah. So what you're saying there by quoting those statistics is that the amount of radiation that's being released by the Fukushima event is somewhere along the scale of what's being released by nuclear weapons. Is that?
Much more.
Oh, more.
Much more.
Okay.
There's 600,000 fuel rods, spent fuel rods there that have collected over 40 years. There are huge amounts of plutonium, uranium, and then all these other fission products in those fuel rods. Those buildings keep blowing up, and the fuel rods are blown up into the air. Some of them were on fire. They landed for 2.5 miles around the site of the explosion. They are continuing to have probably their criticality events. There are huge gamma chimneys blowing up out of the, especially reactor building number 3, out of the spent fuel pools, we believe, that have gone dry, and they are causing fluorescence or glowing of the nitrogen and oxygen atoms in the air over the plant, and the source of these huge gamma bursts sort of turn into huge glowing spots in the building that look like they're as bright as the sun. And this has happened twice. The night of June 14th, there were about 4 hours of radiation releases that were measured in neighboring prefectures at multiple radiation monitors. And I noticed it took about a week for that radiation to arrive here in Berkeley, California. But my radiation meter went up for about a 1-week period when that radiation plume was here. And I just got information from Hawaii that the second event that happened on the night of July the 7th, when there were radiation flashes and another gamma outburst, gamma burst, that radiation also arrived here. And 2 days ago, on July 14th, I got a message from Kauai that the counts had gone up on Kauai at the monitoring station from about 25 counts per minute to 45 to 60. And from that first event on June the 14th at Fukushima, they were getting counts over 100 counts per minute, 150 and 200 counts per minute on Kauai. So Hawaii is getting more radiation than we are on the west coast of North America from these leaks and releases at Fukushima.
And these are
yeah. Go ahead.
And these are on an ongoing basis, and there appears to have been complete resistance to encasing these reactors in concrete or to making some permanent solution to stopping this continued release. Is that the case?
That's correct. And exactly when this disaster happened, when it started, Dr. Alexei Yablokov, one of the top radiation scientists in Russia, who just completed a landmark book on Chernobyl, which is free on the internet. If people want to read it, you should search for Yablokov, YABLAKOV plus Chernobyl, and you will find his book in English with illustrations on the internet. And he's given this tremendous effort to humanity. He and other Russian scientists translated over 500 research papers that have never been read in the West to be able to publish this book.
Now,
so,
I'm sorry. I just want to say that from a logistical standpoint, we're about in this 60-minute segment, we have about 17 minutes left.
Okay.
In the 16-minute segment.
Okay. What Dr. Yablokov, he was staying with Dr. Jeanette Sherman, who reported this 35% increase in infant mortality in California and Seattle cities. But it was 45% in Philadelphia because they have the highest rainout of radioactive iodine in the U.S. in the Philadelphia drinking water. Now, Dr. Yablokov was in Washington, D.C., staying with Dr. Jeanette Sherman when Fukushima happened. They had just finished publishing and editing the new version, which is $10, and it's a wonderful book with the index in the back. It's just great. You can order it over the internet. And they looked at each other and they said, oh my God, this is going to be many times worse than Chernobyl, because Chernobyl was only one reactor that was about 1/6 the size of these reactors. And it was about half the size. And these Fukushima had 7 of these reactors, 6 or 7, I guess 6, and they are much bigger than the Chernobyl reactor. And the real problem is 600,000 spent fuel rods that are going to and already have released huge amounts of radiation. So the last thing I have to say about the Japan situation is that Nature magazine just published a paper by Japanese scientists on the Fukushima disaster and contamination, and the Japanese scientists say there's no fallout legacy for Japan's farms despite prior contamination of food. How Orwellian can you be? And then they recommend cleaning up or scraping up the soil and everything in these hot spots. So they're talking out of both sides of their mouths. It's more of that the academic jokers that are doing this. It's just really crazy. So this lawsuit is very, very important. We hope to have public support and people in future interviews. We will put URLs and websites that people can go to, and also to watch the proceedings and the press conferences when there are Western scientists involved. That is in English, so people would be able to understand that. Now, it's very clear that the strongest point that I made in my declaration to the court is that Fukushima nuclear power plant is still extremely unstable and unpredictable. They continue having these horrific releases. They're not telling anyone. The only way I found out about the June 14th and the July 7th releases was from the TEPCO webcam that is on 24 hours online at the Fukushima plant. So the food contamination across the world, of course we're getting it. And what's happened in the U.S. is that air filters from cars in Seattle have been analyzed for hot particles. And
could I just jump in here?
Yes.
Is this of sufficient importance that we should just do a third program on it? Because we're now at about 10 minutes to the 60-minute mark on this. So,
yes. Oh, yes. Why don't we do that?
Okay, good. So I'm going to stop this recording now.